true again. Now, I want you to look at this road sign. This is the intersection of US 74 and Interstate 95. This is the exact spot where Michael Jordan's father, James Jordan, stopped to rest. And he stopped to rest here on a very specific date. And that date is July 23rd, 1993. Just let that sink in for one moment. That on July 23rd, 1993, James Jordan stopped to rest. He was headed somewhere, and we will get to that in 1 second. But let that sink in. And imagine never waking up. James Jordan, he hit the road shortly after midnight, cruising in the summer darkness in his red Lexus 400. Jordan had spent that day, July 22nd, 1993, at the funeral of a former co-worker in Wilmington, North Carolina, later visiting with friends. Now he was headed 3.5 hours toward his home in Charlotte, scheduled to fly to Chicago the following day. But as I just stated, he never made it. He never made it. Why? Why didn't he make it? Why? On the same evening, there were two guys, Daniel Green and Larry Demery. Daniel Green was the black guy. Larry Demery was a white guy. These guys had been friends or cool or associates, and they was 18 and 17 years old. Excuse me. I was 18 and 17-year-olds, so basically teenagers. They were hanging out at a cookout the same evening. The same very evening. Coincidence or chance? The story is just beginning. But while James Jordan was resting, Larry Demery and Daniel Green were lurking at a cookout in Lumberton, North Carolina. They were just two teenage friends hanging out. But within hours, though, their lives intersected with the father of some would say the greatest basketball player there ever was, Michael Jordan. Now, brace yourself, because James Jordan never woke up from this resting spot that you're looking at, the exact spot. But some kind of way, he wound it up. He wound up in South Carolina in a swamp. His dead body was draped, thrown, floating, stuck on a tree limb. And of course, the investigation begins, because I'm going to fast forward almost 30 years later. Green and Demery got life sentences back then, 1996. The white guy, Demery, and I say that on purpose, not because I'm racist. Check my resume. Because back then at this time, it was a lot going on, and you would need to understand the importance of that to understand what we're about to do. And let's go back and re-examine every single piece of circumstantial evidence, physical evidence, although I will say the lack of physical evidence, and re-examine the testimony of Mr. Demery on his alleged so-called friend, Green, because that's what convicted Green. And let me add, Demery has already been granted parole. Yes. For his testimony against Green, he has been granted parole and is scheduled to be released here soon in 2023 on August the 6th, to be exact. Mr. Green, however, has not been given a fair shake since he was arrested, since he bore witness to his friend. Some would say he was testifying on him, against him. I would say he was lying through his teeth, and that he was never a friend of Mr. Green, because Mr. Green has not been back in court since. Mr. Green has been denied at every level, every motion that he filed. Mr. Green has been fighting to get back in court. And Mr. Green has alleged that he didn't kill James Jordan, as attested to by his friend. And I use that term loosely. He didn't kill James Jordan. He said, I'm guilty of only helping. At that time, I called him my friend, to move James Jordan's body, because my friend came to me and asked me for help. Now, I know what you're thinking. Guilty. You did it. You did it. Ain't no way you can, if you was around his body, you did it. I know. Thank you. Because that is the very reason that we're about to go back in time and examine each and every piece of circumstantial, and I would say physical, but no gun, no nothing, and you will see. But thank you for assuming that, because he said that's what I'm guilty of. Now, you know, if he's telling the truth, that's a 10-year sentence. What's the maximum he could have gotten back then for the exact thing that he admitted to? Now, it's up to the states to prove that he was guilty of something more. And you will see that I don't think they did that. I think they allowed Demery to lie. And with this being Michael Jordan's dad, it was considered a high profile case. And then in 1993, let's not fool ourselves to think racism was a thing of the past, because I have not met George Jetson yet, or unless Bill Gates or Zuckerberg is his uncles or something. But that's where we at, and that's what we're gonna do. Now, 25 years later, almost 30 years, key questions remain unanswered. And with Green still trying to get a new trial in the North Carolina justice system, somehow on the back end of the case, it ain't closed. Questions still remain. And I'm rooting for you, Green. I know you got a parole hearing, another one coming up in October this year, which would be the reason I decided to do what I'm doing right now. Because I know you're waiting on that Superior Court judge to rule on the motions. And I know they overlooked important pieces of the evidence. I know they ignored it. They hid it. They hid some things. And they ignored a lot of things. It didn't matter to them. The only thing that mattered was to close this case. Because Michael Jordan that's Michael Jordan's dad. And we don't need the whole world media in North Carolina. So, yeah, let's examine some of before we go way back. Now, they say James Jordan was one shot killed him. One shot through the chest. And that's a key piece of evidence. Really, that is what the whole case, it's the only real piece of physical evidence that this case is really based on, and we'll get into that later. But remember that hole, because when you shoot somebody in the chest, it's gonna leave a hole through your shirt. There's no way to shoot someone in the chest, kill them with no hole. Impossible. So just remember that shirt, the bullet hole in that shirt is a big piece of this case. And let me introduce that the sheriff, there was a sheriff in this town, and he had a biological son that was a major drug trafficker. Yes, I said it. The sheriff in this town had a biological son that was a drug dealing a drug dealer. And it was well known to everybody that the sheriff is either upholding the law, but his son is selling hella dope. And I ain't finna sugarcoat it. That's just the way it was. Now, let's see if what happened to James Jordan, who lied, who told the truth, who bit the truth, and just who didn't care, and how did they all put their hands on the broom and let one person raise up the rug so that they may sweep it under there. If you're ready, say you're ready. I heard you. True. I'll be right back. Get your notepads out and have your pencils with erasers, because this is going to be a journey you'll never forget. True that.